I am so excited for today's guest because there's something special that happens when therapists get together. We just talk on a different level. And I'm sure for anybody listening or watching, when you find someone else who's in your field, like, I don't know, you go to a networking event and let's say you're an accountant and you run into another accountant, it's like, girl, we're out in the woods. What are we doing together? So that is what it's like when therapists get together. It's like we skip the small talk and it's straight to the deeps. And so that's why I love having therapists on the podcast because we all, even though we have similar skills and experiences, obviously we're unique people and we bring unique experiences. So today we are going to have Eloise on with us. So I'm going to get her to introduce herself for those who don't know Eloise. But before we get into that, just a reminder, whenever we have a guest on the podcast, we always follow my 4R formula, which is reflect. So we're going to get Eloise to reflect on and let us know who she is. Then we redefine, redesign, and realign. So let's get into it. So, Eloise, thanks for being on the podcast. For those who don't know you, can you give us a bit of a spiel on who you are and what you do?
Thanks so much, Sheena. I'm so excited to be here and to be chatting with you. And I'm Eloise Tomkins, and I'm a money confidence coach and psychologist. And I really love to help women change their relationship with money through body-based techniques. And people might be thinking, what are body-based techniques? Don't worry, we will go into that throughout the show, I'm sure. And the reason for that is because, and again, Sheena, we're going to go into this, is because what I learned is that I was so disconnected from my body, which led to my own burnout. And now I'm so passionate about helping other people reconnect to their bodies so that they can make more money in their business so that they don't burn out.
Absolutely. I am really excited about this. And for those of you who aren't a therapist, you're not a psychologist, a counselor, a social worker, I need you to understand that what Eloise and I are doing when we talk about the things we talk about, we are seen as rebels in our field because
Mhm.
there are a lot of old school thinkers who are like, therapists shouldn't share this about themselves or their relationship or what they've been through or talk about spirituality or talk about money. Like, literally, I feel like pre-COVID, pre the TikTok blow up and all of those things, there was this kind of thing of like, have this rigid box and you do not leave that box. And so, for a lot of you who follow me, I talk about the law of assumption and law of attraction. And similarly to Eloise, like body-based things and visualization and all of that. And don't get me wrong, there's times where we touch on that in therapy, but doing what we do is very bold and it takes a lot of bravery from both of us. I don't know about you, Eloise, but I know that it was like when I first really going hard on Instagram, I definitely had those, oh my God, what the hell are my coworkers going to think? So before we get into the rest of your story, did you feel that kind of going from being a traditional psychologist to now being a money coach?
Oh my gosh, Sheena, you have no idea. Well, actually, you out of everyone probably do, but yeah, absolutely. And I consider myself a disruptor, and and I always have been from a very young age. I never fit into the boxes, but I always tried to fit into the box. And even with psychology, like, and we need it. We need therapists to use evidence-based practices. We can't have therapists going out there doing whatever the heck they like. And not being able to provide evidence-based treatment. So I understand the need for rigidity and rules. However, I feel like we take it too far sometimes. And I remember when I very first started my business, and I'm a psychologist, I know ethics, I got all of my legal stuff checked, and I put in a lot of groundwork, a lot of expensive groundwork, and got all of my I's dotted, my T's crossed. And then I got an email from someone who, funnily enough, didn't put their last name, couldn't figure out who it was. I assumed it was a psychologist who basically said, you're not being ethical. You're not allowed to do that. Even though you're saying you're a coach, actually, you're a psychologist, and therefore you shouldn't be doing this. No idea who this person was. no idea how they came across me, no idea how to, find them. And I emailed back and I just said, thank you for your concern about the psychology profession. But honestly, I can assure you that I've done everything by the book. I'm good. And they actually had threatened to report me to APRA, the governing kind of body, or the body
Mhm.
that represents the public to keep them safe. So that was really early on. And I think I could have very easily been terrified and been like, nah, I'm going to stop now. But I decided, like you, to keep moving ahead because I knew that there's something better waiting on the other side.
Oh my God, fuck the haters.
I know, right?
Like what benefit is them for you? And I think this is where people project their own insecurities of
100%.
too bad that you didn't go for your dream. You want to attack someone who's going for their dream. And
Mm,
we're both very open about the fact that what I do is coaching. What I do is mentoring.
mm,
When you coach or mentor with me, I'm not charging you through Medicare. I'm not charging you through private
mhm,
health. So it's not a health service. You can't hold me accountable for all of that. If I'm doing direct one-on-ones and I'm using Medicare, different story. But
100%.
and so anyway, it boggles the mind. And here's the
Mm,
thing. As you said, we need therapists in this space because the amount of, you know, people out there who do some 6-week NLP course and think they can now treat trauma or they can now treat anxiety without knowing the ins and outs of it. And in
mm,
even bagging out people who have a university degree, like uni didn't teach you this. And it's like, yeah, but it gave me some really good frameworks that you do not have and
yeah.
knowledge, right? So I just want to say before we move on, regardless of this conversation, I'm really proud of you for not giving up because I can't imagine getting that email early on in the business, like getting
Mm.
that email now. I'm like, oh, look, people are finding me. But if I got that email early on when I'm still finding my footing, I'm still
Yeah.
figuring this out. Crazy. So let's get into now that we know a little bit about you, Eloise Tomkins, psychologist, mindset coach, money coach, all of those things. Tell us about the story that's led here. So, second point of my 4R formula is the redefine. So, tell us a moment that maybe redefined some things for you, or a experience of burnout, whatever the thing is that made you sort of stop in your tracks and had to really, you know, question life and the direction you were going.
Oh gosh, which one? Um, there are many, but I think the one that really got me to start my business and to really think about the fact that I needed to shift gears is as a psychologist, ironically, and I don't know whether this is the same for you, Sheena, in like social work, but as psychologists, I remember back in my honors year, so to become a psychologist, it's a 6-year degree. And in my fourth year of studying, so in my honors year, I remember being so sick because I was pushing myself so hard. Because psychology, and to become a psychologist and to move through all of the different phases, there was this really big emphasis at uni on grades. And I pushed myself to try and make sure that I was getting high distinctions, or at least distinctions that were in the higher end, because I knew that if I didn't, I wouldn't move to the next stage and I wouldn't be able to reach my goal. So psychology breeds high achievers. Psychology attracts high achievers. I am a high achiever. So, you know, you have this combination of all of these factors. So I worked and worked and worked and worked, got to a point where I had to deliver a presentation. And if I didn't, I would fail the unit. But I was so sick. I remember I got to university, I did my presentation, and I was white, clammy, said to my supervisor, I'm really unwell. Can I go home? And another supervisor who wasn't my supervisor looked at me and she was like, oh, you can't go home. How unfair is that for other people who have to stay here all day? So I stayed because I didn't
Oh
want to fail.
God.
And that was kind of moment number one. Then, and it kind of made me think, oh my goodness, they don't value me. I have to put my needs aside. I have to put what's happening for me aside even though I was so unwell. I went home, I slept for 16 hours, went to the doctor, I found out I had tonsillitis and I was so sick, but I cried in the doctor's office and I said, I don't have time to rest. I need to get through this year. And he looked at me and he said, okay, I can give you an injection in the bum and that'll help you. And I was like, do it, because I was just so determined to get through. So I did that and I thought, okay, that's just one experience. No. And then I kept working in psychology and I got into a dream job. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've got this dream job. Now I'm finally going to be happy. And working in this dream job with these amazing clients and this amazing team, I had this experience where I was working with a client who I just did not like. And yes, as a psychologist, sometimes that happens, just like everyone. But the thing is, I was working in a place where I couldn't really say I didn't want to work with that client. It just wasn't the thing that you could do. And I really struggled with this client, really, really struggled. And my nervous system was just on fire whenever I would work with them. So I said something, I'm like, look, I'm just really, really struggling. I've been working there for years, never said no, spoke up. And the response was, Ellie, what could you have done differently with that client in order to make the session go better? And I was like, I hear what you're saying. And as psychologists, we do need to reflect and think and, make sure that we are delivering really good, high quality services to our clients. But it took a lot of courage for me to even speak up and say, I'm really struggling with this. And I didn't feel like I mattered. And I started, those moments kind of led me to develop this really strong disillusionment with psychology, because I'm like, the fuck, like my needs matter. And I realized as a profession in psychology that we put other people's needs ahead of our own so much, and it's reinforced and rewarded, that I was like, fuck this, I am going to start a candle business. And I was legit, like, that's exactly, I kid you not, I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I was Googling how to set up a candle business. I was Googling like the silver vats that you'd melt the candle wax in. I was Googling scents and fragrances and suppliers. And I was seriously contemplating it. And I'm like, I'm going to create a business that's going to make money. And because of psychology, I was not making money. And I thought, I got to do something different, because I can't do this. I can't work in this job where I'm minimized and treated like my needs don't matter. And that was kind of a turning point. And then obviously I didn't do that. And thankfully, another psychologist kind of came along, and I found a psychologist who was running a coaching program, kind of like a trailblazer like us, who said, Ellie, actually, you have some incredible skills. You don't have to go and start a candle business. You can actually use your skills in a different way. And that started me on the coaching path. And yeah, I haven't looked back.
And I think, just for context, for anybody listening, it's so interesting. I'm an accredited mental health social worker, but I did, it probably says a lot about me, because I did my undergrad in psychology, then I did a master's of counseling, then I did a master's of social work. And I always joke, because there's certain personalities in our field, like psychologists tend to be anxious perfectionists, and social workers tend to be, hippie and depressed, because, there's that thing of, they see the systems, they learn about oppression, they learn about capitalism, they learn about all these effects on mental health and relationships and, women's rights and all of that, and then realize that money equals power, which is really interesting, right? And so, and I don't know what that says about me, where I've got the anxious perfectionistic, I've got the depressed, and then I've got the counselor part of me that's like, love and joy for everyone. Counselors are sort of seen like that, and it's so funny. But at the same time, a lot of people don't understand that behind closed doors of our profession, if you work, say, like we both have, like in a private practice for somebody else, or in a hospital setting, we are expected to just bang out session after session after session with everyone. But in our training, what we're told is that if there really is a client who triggers you, or like you're saying, like you genuinely can feel like my nervous system is not safe with this person, we can't work with them because it literally lets us know I can't be objective here. And I think, again, this is why therapists are so important, because coaches don't learn that. They'll work with
Yeah.
anyone and everyone. They'll take their money and then not give a fuck about the client. Whereas we're like, I care about this person and I recognize that I am not the person for them.
Yeah.
And that was what Ellie was doing in that situation. It's not like she's like, I don't like their personality. It wasn't like that. It's like, I want this person to get the very best help that they can, and I'm not the person for that. And that takes a whole lot of intelligence,
Mm.
knowledge, and boundaries. So I just want to make that clear, because sometimes I think if other people have ever listened to this and had that experience, I want them to understand the kind of behind the scenes of what we have to go through as well. And so it's really hard when we have the courage to go to a supervisor and say,
Mm.
I am unable to do this, and that supervisor doesn't support you. And I
Mm.
think, regardless of profession, if you have a manager, a mentor, even like if you have your own business and you have a business mentor and you go to them and you go, look, I'm not handling my business. Things need to change. It is just not working. If your mentor goes, oh, well, you just need to stretch yourself, you need to push yourself, you need to go harder, they're not listening. And it's the same whether you work in corporate and you have a manager who's like, you're not stepping up enough. Of course, that is an environment for anxiety, burnout, depression, because you're like, my needs have not been met. I had the courage to actually express myself. And instead of being heard, I got shut down. So I think what you're saying is so important and such a shared experience. So thank you for sharing that. And so let's get on to, so you had this redefining moment, a few of them along the way, where you're going, the rigidity of the medical profession is just not for me. And as a fellow ADHD therapist, girl, I get it. I do not go well in inefficient workplaces. I'm like, nah, I can't handle this. I just need to work for myself because I can change things at the drop of a
Mhm.
hat.
Which is
So
a good thing, but a curse as well.
it's a blessing and a curse. But regardless, tell me about, how did you redesign your life after that? Because obviously you didn't go the candle business. Thank goodness for your clients now. But how did you go from, okay, I've studied all this time, put all this time, money, energy, effort into being a psychologist, getting my dream job, only to realize this isn't for me. What were the next steps in like pivoting and allowing yourself to perhaps touch into your own business and coaching?
Yeah. And, it's such an interesting question. And like to reflect back on it, I was at a point, and I think this is where the body based stuff really comes into it for me, because I had done a lot of work on myself, and in terms of therapy, in terms of self help books, like I'd read all the books, I'd been to therapy for a long time, and I knew myself quite well. And at the same time, the other side of it was kind of like, what do I do? How do I integrate that? Because I didn't want to lose all of my skills and all of the hard work that I'd done, but I couldn't quite work out the next steps. And I think it was trying to figure out, like what you were saying before, how do I make sure that my nervous system is safe? And I was struggling to kind of put that together in a way that I could do it in psychology. And it just so happened that I found this person, this other psychologist who had this coaching program. And it was the first time I'd really come across the concept of coaching. And
Mm-hmm.
somehow found her at just the right time, enrolled in her program, and that opened my eyes up to being able to do things differently. And I thought, this is great because I'm going to be able to use my skills in a way that is non-clinical. So what that essentially means is in a way that's not therapy, in a way that's not treating mental health conditions, in a way that I can use my skills and help a lot more women, and be able to do it in a way, because I was starting to see, like you were saying, all these other coaches out there who have their space. Don't get me wrong. Like, I think that coaches do have their spaces out there.
Mm.
And I also think that so do therapists. And I was sort of seeing that gap. And as I was starting to explore that more, I was like, oh, okay, there's more out there for me. And I think I grew up in an environment that was very kind of blinkers on. You don't look anywhere else other than straight ahead. And like growing up, it was just very much survival mode. And you look ahead and you don't, there's no other options. And so what I started to realize through all of my therapy and through that body-based work was that I started to feel more safe in myself and I could open up to different opportunities. And so what that essentially allowed me to do was take a risk in myself. And that was something that I had never really done before. Like that coaching program was, I can't remember exactly, but around like $4,000 or $5,000. And that was a lot of money to me to invest in something that was not a holiday or a car or something practical, air quotes, practical. And so I took that risk and I backed myself. I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try it because there are other people out there that are doing it. And it was only because I was starting to feel safe in my body that I was able to kind of take that next step.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. And you know, that was part of my journey too. I think we first connected when I was doing therapist VA, which is the same similar concepts where I was helping health professionals step out of what we're doing. And you know what's really interesting, Eloise, and I haven't shared this on the podcast before, but part of the reason that I closed that business down, even though it was super profitable in a lot of ways, and I love talking about this stuff, is that you and I are the 1%. And even that psychologist teaching the coaching is the 1% because a lot of people would relate to my content. A lot of, naturopaths,
Yeah.
psychologists, nutritionists, osteos. They're like, wow, that sounds great. Wow. But then when it comes to it, fear,
Yeah.
APRA, oh, I'm not making money straight away. I'm just going to go back to NDIS. I'm just going to go back to Medicare.
Yeah.
Not realizing like, yeah, this might take 3 to 5 years to build, maybe longer, maybe less,
Yeah.
depending. We don't know, but it can give you such a better life, better quality like results for your clients because you're not stuck in doing one thing for them. You can do a
Yeah.
multitude of things. And so that was what I found really difficult with that business is that people want to do these things, but actually doing it was hard. It's almost like training someone for a marathon, but they refuse to run the marathon. And it's like, well, what did we do all this training for? And over a while, it gets frustrating. And I didn't want to take people's money if they weren't going to take the jump. So I just want to say again, incredible that you've done that. And for anybody listening who's done that, well done you, because again, not everyone can do that. To do something different from the rest of your profession, your field, your coworkers, not an easy thing. So finally, let's get to the real line of, okay, you've gone through this massive journey. You've started your own business. You're doing all of these things. And now you're on the right track, right? Like you're this incredible money coach. Some of the things that you pull out, I'm like, wow, I never thought of it that way. Like it's really cool because, I think the online space nowadays between Instagram and TikTok, so many of the same shit. I'm so sick of seeing the same shit of like how to have a 30K month in like 2.5 hours a month. Like, like I'm so over it. How I made 1.4 million in only working like 4 hours a month. I'm like, girl, I'm done. But some of the things you say, I've never heard anyone say. And this is when you know you're on the right track, when you're
Yeah.
like, what do I want to be known for? And what are the things I want to say? So nowadays, what are you doing to hold the path, to stay on this path? Because again, for you and for me, it can be really easy to fall into our old careers, right? So how do you stay the path and what do you do for your clients now when they're sort of feeling the same or having these money mindset issues come up?
Such an amazing question. I love
A
it.
big question. So take your
It is
time if you need to.
a big question, but I love it because and I guess I want to speak to like I hear you on the other therapists who get scared and or other allied health professionals that get scared. And it can be really like starting a business is not for the faint-hearted. I tell you what, I have never worked so hard in my life. And it's interesting because we're talking about burnout, right? And I have to balance that line every day. I have to balance that line every week where it's because I'm kind of balancing my psych work as well, because my business is not at the point where I can jump into it full time yet.
Mm.
I know that that will come, but you're right. You have to lay those foundations. And I think people make it look really easy on TikTok, on Instagram. I'm going to make a $1.4 million month and I'm working 4 hours. Okay. So what? Like there's 50,000 people doing that. Like how? How do you do that? Oh, you had to lay the foundations. Okay. People don't want to do that. People don't want to lay the foundations. They want it to be quick. And I'm one of those. Like I want it to be quick as well, but I'm laying the foundations. And so what motivates me is the fact that I know that you reap the rewards of what you sow. You don't go into your garden and plant seeds, water them, and then come back the next day expecting them to be sunflowers. You have to tend to that soil every day. I don't know why I'm using a garden analogy because I actually am good at indoor plants, but outdoor plants, different story. But that's kind of, the same thing. I'm sowing all of these seeds. Why? Because I know I am going to make an impact. I am making an impact. And that gets me out of bed every morning because I'm passionate about it. And
Yeah.
it's not easy some days. Some days I wake up and I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? This is hard. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't want to do this. It's too much. And you know what? That's a sign in that moment that I need to look inwards and go, okay, what do I need right now? Do I need to take a little bit of time off to just kind of slow myself down? And actually, that's what I'm doing right at this moment. Well, maybe not literally right now. I've got this idea floating in my brain and I rushed and jumped into something too quickly, jumped into an idea too quickly, and it worked and it was great, but it wasn't aligned. And now I'm pulling back and I'm slowing myself down intentionally. So I know myself pretty well in terms of, okay, I can jump ahead really fast. And I've got that overworking button and perfectionism button. I've got all of that in me. So how do I know that about myself, have that self-awareness and slow myself down when needed, pull the handbrake? And I use coaches for that, to be honest. Like I have a really great coach at the moment who encourages me to slow down. And sometimes I don't listen. I'm not going to lie. Sometimes it's hard to listen. It's hard, like you hear it, but sometimes it can be hard, even when somebody's telling you something, to actually hear what they're saying. And the other part of that is what I do with my clients is I help give them the tools to kind of reprogram their nervous system. So, because one of the things I think is that body-based side of it, which is so important. And I think it's such an underrated part of the puzzle. And when I talk about body-based stuff, what I mean by that is so often we think about mindset, like if I work harder, then I'm going to make more money. That's a thought, right? Like that's something that's going on in our head. Or I know that I need to heal my relationship with money. That's a thought. But what actually happens is we have feelings in our body. We have a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, particularly these high achiever, perfectionist types. We have a lot of stress that's stored in our body. And our subconscious, I actually only learned this the other day. Our subconscious processes 40 million, 20 million bits of information per second. 20 million bits of information per second. Million. I was like, oh my God. But then I think about it and I'm like, okay, at the moment, I'm processing my voice, I'm processing my body movements, I'm processing all of the bits of information that I'm seeing on the screen, the noises outside. But our conscious awareness is only processing 40 bits of information. 40 versus 20 million. So my point with that is when we have all of this stuff that's going on in our subconscious, in our body, that we're not even aware of, our body is responding to all of these information. So by the time it gets into our conscious awareness, our subconscious has already had a stress response, has already released stress, the cortisol stress response. It has already tensed up to get into action before our conscious mind has even caught up. So what I do is really help women to be able to notice those signs before they happen or earlier, because we often notice them when they're at a 10 out of 10. So I help them notice it when we're at a 2 or a 3. I also help reprogram it through subconscious reprogramming techniques like EMDR or visualizations and things like that, so that we can stop having such a really strong reaction in our body, because that was the missing piece for me that really helped me to shift my own experience with burnout and to be able to slow myself down when finding myself getting into that state of stress. So it's, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just find all of it really fascinating. And and I think that a lot of people are going to benefit from that, knowing, we can reprogram these things and it's so important. So this has been such an interesting conversation. And I guess one final thing that I love that you touched on that I was thinking of is that, you know, that is a big part of burnout and a big part of pursuing your brilliance, because this is burnout to brilliance. How can I pursue my most brilliant ideas, my most brilliant self, my most brilliant all of that, but not burnout? Because I'm very similar to you of, I need the internal work, I need my own boundaries, because previous to the work that I've done on myself, if you sat me in front of a computer and worked on my business, if I didn't have the kids, if I didn't have this, I could sit there the whole day. I literally I could. And so it's been a whole big thing to actually go, reprogram, like I can work less and earn more. All of that reprogram, which I know that is important to you. So, for anybody listening, this isn't an overnight job. And I think everyone listening is very naturally a high achiever. And it's just a really important reminder. I said this on another guest podcast who I've got on this podcast, another guest, but it's worth repeating. You can absolutely achieve your goals in a calm, regulated, and chilled out way. I think we need to let go of this idea that we have to hustle, grind, be anxious, running off our feet, running 100 miles an hour, like the tortoise and the hare thing, right? Like you can do it in a calm and regulated way, but you got to train yourself to be okay with that. You got to train yourself to get there. And I think part of your story is like you're still working through it. I definitely do that, and I have moments where I slip back into just wanting to do that. But I think that's incredible. So where can people find you if they want to connect with you, if they want to learn from you? Where are the best places that you hang out? Your handles, tell us all of that.
Yeah, so I am on Insta. I love a little bit of Instagram at Eloise Tomkins _.
Can you spell Tomkins for us? Because there's a few on there, and I want to make sure I get it right. I want to make sure people get it right.
It's a good point because people can spell it lots of different ways. So it's Eloise, ELOISE TOMKINS is my predominant place to hang out. The other thing that I have available as well is a new masterclass that I'm just releasing, From Fear to Financial Freedom, which kind of goes through all of the stuff that we've touched on today in terms of being able to understand your body-based, how that impacts your relationship with money. So if you're okay with that, I can give you the link and feel free to pop it into the show notes. Otherwise, head to my website, www.eloisetomkins.com, and you'll be able to find it there.
Amazing. Well, thank you for being on today. I know a lot of people are going to enjoy that one. And for anybody listening, have a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and I will see you in the next episode of Burnout to Brilliance.